Welcome to Chariots of Flowers. My name is Coralie, and today I will be musing about the Oneiroi. And yes, before anyone says anything, I did look this up a bunch of times, and apparently it's pronounced Oneiroi, not Oneiroi. So, my favorite show right now is The Sandman, which is based off of the comics written by the epic and the iconic Neil Gaiman. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. It's about 11 episodes, and I am literally addicted to the show. It's literally my comfort show at the moment. But I was watching it last night, and I remember it kind of just popped in my head the idea of like dream deities, since the protagonist's dream of the endless is basically inspired by Morpheus in the lore of the show slash the comics. Dream goes by a bunch of different names, Morpheus being one of them. So then I decided that I was just going to look up dream deities, and the only thing that popped up were the Oneiroi. So I kind of just stuck with that, and of course the information on the Oneiroi is just based on very, very limited information. So I'm just going to stick with the information that I have and then muse on about that. So here we go. So here's a super quick language lesson for you all. So in Greek, Oneiroi translates to dreams in plural form. Its singular form is oneros, which just translates to a dream or simply dream. So if you've watched The Sandman, specifically episode 11, if you haven't, I just suggest that you skip over for a few seconds since it's going to contain a couple spoilers. But if you have watched it or you don't care, then you can keep listening. In episode 11, Dream's ex-wife Calliope refers to him as Oneros. So basically, she is calling him Dream, but she's just using his name in Greek. In Greek mythology, the Oneiroi are the personified spirits of dreams. They are the children of Hypnos. So Hypnos is the god of sleep. In Roman mythology, Hypnos' equivalent is Somnus, who is also the god of sleep. The Oneiroi are roughly 1,000 children of Hypnos, and they're all in charge of creating and influencing dreams for various reasons. Now, Hypnos was the twin brother of Thanatos, who was the personification of death. Thanatos was the one to carry off humans from Earth all the way to the underworld whenever the time allotted to them by the fates had expired. Now, obviously, Thanatos has been the blueprint for the Angel of Death, the Grim Reaper, and a lot of other ideas that stems from the idea of death being a person that escorts humans to the afterlife. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Neil Gaiman was influenced by Thanatos to create Dream's sister, Death of the Endless, as Death and Thanatos are pretty similar in what they do. And since Hypnos and Thanatos are siblings and Dream and Death are siblings, I would not be surprised if there was that influence. So one of the sources that I found that really kind of talk about the Oneiroi in semi-depth, but it's still useful nonetheless, is Ovid's Metamorphoses. So I'm just going to read you a small passage from that. It's in, for those who are following, it's book 11, lines 633 through 644. Somnus, out of the horde of his 1,000 children, Awakened Morpheus, the master mimic, the quickest of all to capture a person's walk, his facial expression, and tone of voice. He'll also adopt his original's clothing and typical language. Morpheus, however, can only imitate human beings. Another, called Ikelos by the gods, Phobetor by ordinary mortals, can turn into birds or beasts or long-tailed reptiles. A third in the family, Phantasos, practices different skills. His deception involves transforming himself into earth or water, mountainous rocks or trees, and other inanimate objects. Some of the dreams will appear at night to kings or to prominent figures, while others will visit the general mass of the people. So, jumping off of that passage, I remember reading somewhere that Morpheus, Ikelos, and Phantasos are only mentioned in Ovid's text. They're not mentioned anywhere else and they don't exist anywhere else. So a lot of people argue that they were really just inventions by Ovid for the sake of the text and therefore can't really be deemed as mythology but more like literary figures. But I also find it hilarious that there's literally 1,000 children of Hypnos, and out of all of them, we only get to know three of them. But I think that only three of them being mentioned makes sense for literary purpose because of the rule of three, and three representing just completion in drama and in literature and just in general. But can you imagine if Ova took the time to just name every single child of Hypnos and just explain their abilities? I feel like at some point you would just run out of details to come up with. Like, this is words, and they just come up with the dialogue of your dreams and nightmares. And this is swallow, and they only appear in the dreams of babies. And this is sheep, and they just appear. Not actually, technically, Ikelos would appear as sheep to then appear in people's dreams to jump over the fences in order to induce sleep, but then that would no longer technically fall under dream, but that would literally be hypnosis job to inspire that in someone in order to get them to fall asleep so that way the Oniri can go do their thing. So if someone wanted to have a dream about sheep, then the Oniri would just, well, Ikelos would just have to take over that. But then, yeah, but then Hypnos would be the one to inspire the thought of sheep within a person's mind in order to make them fall asleep. That's actually really interesting. But yeah, so it's just that trio that we hear about. That's the only trio that matters really. And out of that trio, we only just, the one who actually in that particular story, in which I took the passage from, the only one that actually kind of matters in all this is Morpheus, the imitator, the shapeshifter. Morpheus over time just kind of became the go-to term or the go-to person to say, ah, yes, the god of dreams and sleep, and that's it. And then from there, that's where we kind of get that from. When in reality, Morpheus, as far as Ovid's design or intent when creating the character Morpheus, was just, yeah, he's a people person. He's the people guy for dreams, and we'll just leave it at that. But I think it kind of makes sense that we have someone who whose job is to lay just it's a dream personification who personifies humans in dreams or can literally come to someone's dreams and take the shape of a person, whether it's someone that you know or someone you've never met before, and come off as a convincing human to the dreamer in question. Can you imagine just how hard that job would be? Because I'm just imagining, like, of course, if you're having like a nightmare about like, I don't know, like a slasher, like the stuff from like slasher films, then like that would be a terrifying thing to morph into. Like, ah, yes, I'm going to turn into this serial killer and just completely traumatize the dreamer tonight. Or imagine for, let's say, if a dreamer is having like an erotic dream, not to get like extremely like R rated on this episode, but just like imagine for an erotic dream, then like for a sex dream, then Morpheus, as far as Ovid's version is concerned, would just have to appear as the person who then becomes the object of lust and basically ends up hooking up with the dreamer. But of course, it's all consensual if it's a sex dream. But oh, like just like thinking about in terms of how dreams actually work, that that could be, oh, that's weird. That's such a weird job to have as a human shapeshifter. And of course, if you're just a random person, then Morpheus would just morph into a random person and leave it at that. And then there's the whole question of just time and place as well, right? Because imagine being Morpheus and having to appear as a person in dreams. And now that almost, at least in my experience, almost every dream involves other people, that means Morpheus in question would not have a day off, right? Because then he would have to always be tending to a time zone in which millions of people are asleep at any given time, while also taking into account nappers and siesta takers all at the same time. I mean, imagine having to be a teacher giving an SAT exam to someone who's having a flashback dream about exams back in high school, or you're appearing as like someone's parent in another one, or a celebrity in another one, or an angel in another one, someone's crush in another one, a lover in another one, someone's best friend, a historical figure, a doctor, a truck driver, an astronaut, a fictional character, or at least the version of the fictional character that's in the person's mind. Imagine having to basically personify characters that might inspire the dreams of writers who are asleep, because some writers get a lot of their ideas from sleep. So imagine like having to like kind of uh, borrow from the ideas coming up in someone's subconscious about a character creation or a story creation, and then deciding, you know what if I just like played it this at this angle, and then the writer wakes up and is like, oh my god, that's perfect. So really the writer would be just recording down the version that Morpheus would have decided to have taken on. And then that's before we take into account the nightmare archetypes that often pop up in people's nightmares as well, right? The teacher giving the pop quiz that no one asked for, the clown, the slasher, Dracula. Well, actually, Dracula's not that scary to me, but it's just like imagine having to be the stuff of dreams and the stuff of nightmares all at once, all the time, for very different reasons, in a way that appeals to the hopes and fears of each dreamer in question, while taking into account the age and culture and personality and really just the background and history of the dreamer in general. That, ooh, yeah, I feel like, and that's before taking to account the other like tasks that Morpheus's siblings have to take on too. Like they never really get any rest or like vacation off. It's not like they have holidays off, right? It's not like, oh yeah, it's New Year's, so we're just not going to appear in people's dreams. And like that's not how it works. That's really like the one job, right? Being part of the Oniri is probably the one job where you never really get a day off, which yeah, I personally would not want that job. Just because of both like just how exhaustive the task list would be, as well as your schedule. You don't get any time off. You're just constantly working with no breaks, and you're not getting paid. But of course, they're deities, so you can't think of it like that. But can you imagine if it was a job? That would, yeah, that'd be a lot. And I guess you could arguably say the same thing for like Ikelos, right? I mean, it's funny because I think the reason why Ikelos has two names is because I think as far as the gods are concerned, Ikelos doesn't really phase them. But as Phobator is supposed to be the stuff of nightmares because Ikelos, I think, translates to like or imitation, maybe, while Phobator translates to frightening. So, thus, the whole, yeah, showing up, like the idea is that Ikelos could like turn into like a monster or some sort of scary animal and terrify the dreamer in question. And I'm just thinking about the whole thing about like in one dream, Ikelos could be this puppy or cat or like guinea pig or like porcupine that amuses the dreamer. And then in another one, be Phobator and appear as like a giant snake and scare the dreamer. The dreamer has a phobia of snakes, or maybe because of Phobator and being a snake, the dreamer might actually just develop a fear of serpents after that. And then meanwhile, with Phantassos, whose name translates into fantasy, I can't really think of an inanimate object that's like scary. I suppose that's why Phantassos is named Phantassos, because mountainous stuff and water and earth and forestry and waterfalls and weather and environment and ecosystems that I don't know about anyone else, but that doesn't terrify me. Like if I was in a dream which I was in a forest, I mean, like if it was a scary forest, then I can see where, let's say, the like not the idea of a forest would scare me, but if it was like a creepy forest, then yeah, actually that could be scary. But I guess that's where other elements come in, right? So that's where Morpheus and Ikelos would have a big factor as to what happens next. Because if you're having a dream in which you're in a forest on a hike and you discover like a really cute fawn, then that's just a dream. But if you're in the woods at night and you have a clown and a bear chasing you at the same time, then that could be pretty freaking terrifying. So I can see where the three of them, and also three siblings working together to create the stuff of dreams or nightmares, to me feels like enough. Even though I know I was trying to figure out what would Ovid even have talked about if he went through all thousand of them, but Is 1,000 kids even necessary? Come to think of it? But I suppose the dialogue of the dreams, the. Yeah, maybe Ovid was doing a little too much, come to think of it. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think about the Oniri from Ovid's perspective, especially since that's the only time in which we see three figures named amongst the Oniri, but in other sources, they're not explicitly named, they're just Oniri or Oneros. And I know they appear in at least three other literary sources, I believe. And I think the Iliad and the Odyssey are two of those. So I think I'm gonna do some investigating there as well. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna look into that. And once I do, and I gather my thoughts on that, I'm gonna do an episode just dedicated to the Oniri Part 2. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, that's it for today. This has been Chariots of Flowers. Thank you all so much for listening today, and I'll see you all next week. Later.